The neighbor 2 doors down smiled at me every morning while sleeping with my wife. If you drove down our street in late spring, you'd think you were looking at a brochure for the American Dream Limited Edition. Maple Ridge Lane is the kind of place real estate agents describe with adverbs. The kind of street where everyone waves from their driveways and Amazon packages never go missing because someone's always keeping an eye out. It's quiet on weeknights, loud on Saturdays when the dads wheel out their grills, and oddly competitive about Halloween decorations. The HOA emails read like passive-aggressive poetry. The kids' chalk drawings stay on the sidewalks for weeks because no one wants to hose away their joy. I was proud to live there, genuinely. My wife, Lauren, and I had clawed our way out of a one-bedroom rental with paper-thin walls and into a 3-bed, 2.5-bath with a yard big enough for a hand-me-down trampoline. We painted the front door a cheerful blue that Pinterest told us meant welcoming, even though I later learned it also shows dirt like crazy. And we planted a row of hydrangeas along the fence that we both pretended we knew how to care for. We were not fancy, but we felt like we'd finally made it to whatever tier of adulthood includes Home Depot runs and arguing about mulch. We moved in on a drizzly Saturday in April. Our first official neighbor moment happened around noon when a tall guy in a baseball cap walked over with 2 cans of La Croix tucked under his arm like a friendly delivery. He had that easygoing, well-moisturized look of a man who knows the exact day his lawn service is coming. "Jake," he said, sticking out a hand, 2 doors down. "Welcome to the cul-de-sac." I took a can, mumbled a thank you, and introduced him to Lauren, who came out carrying a box labeled books that we both knew was actually full of miscellaneous wires and a broken rotor we'd never throw away. Lauren smiled. The smile that got me the first time I saw her at a friend's trivia night. Wide and bright, like sunlight bouncing off a lake. She thanked him for the drinks, and he laughed a little too long at something she said about the weather. At the time, I told myself he was just being neighborly. That's what you do when you move to places like this. You give people the benefit of the doubt. That's part of the charm, right? We're all in this little suburban pageant together, and the least we can do is clap for each other's lines. By late afternoon, 3 more neighbors had materialized from garages like NPCs, triggered by a side quest. Patricia, retired nurse, keeps cookies in her freezer for emergencies like new neighbors. The Masons, twin boys, enormous golden retriever, loud but the good kind, and a woman named Cora who asked how we felt about joining the block text chain with the kind of smile you give someone right before selling them a timeshare. We handed out our numbers like business cards at an awkward networking event and pretended we didn't mind the HOA booklet in our mailbox that included a line about seasonal inflatables, being tasteful in proportion to lot size. That night, the boxes formed a fortress in the living room. We ate pizza cross-legged on the floor and drank beer out of mismatched mugs because the glasses were nowhere to be found. Lauren leaned her head on my shoulder and said, "I think we're going to be really happy here." I said, "Me too." And I meant it. I meant it with the kind of bone-deep certainty you only get a handful of times in a life. When you sign a lease without reading it, when you accept a job because the money is better, even though the commute is worse, when you say "I do" and have no idea that someday you'll wish you'd asked follow-up questions. The first few weeks were a montage, mowing the lawn while listening to podcasts about people with bigger problems than dandelions, learning that our trash pickup guy will absolutely leave your bin if the lid doesn't close, arguing about whether the couch should go under the window or float. Lauren's word. I had to Google how to float a couch. Lauren brought home a lemon tree for the back deck and named it Sir Citrus, and I pretended I didn't care, but secretly checked its leaves every morning like it was a tiny green patient. And then there were the weekend cookouts. Maple Ridge treats the first 70-degree Saturday like a holiday. Grills roll out, yard chairs multiply, someone drags a Bluetooth speaker onto a porch, kids form a scooter gang and do drive-bys with popsicles like sugary contraband. Jake was the undisputed king of the grill. He had one of those heavy-duty setups that looks like it could launch a satellite, and he wore an apron that said "Meat Daddy," which should have been a red flag, but somehow played as charming in a cul-de-sac where people wear novelty t-shirts unironically. The first time we went over, Lauren wore a sundress she usually saved for dates. I told myself it was because everything clean was still in a box. Jake waved us in with a set of tongs like he was marshalling an airplane, and he put a beer in my hand before I had a chance to say, "I'm fine, thanks." He introduced us to his wife, Marissa, petite, quiet, the kind of person who smiles with her mouth but not her eyes. She had a way of watching a conversation like she was trying to remember it for later. They'd lived on the street for 4 years. He worked in ops for a logistics company. She did project-based consulting, a phrase that could mean anything from makes 6 figures wrangling calendar invites to sells candles on Facebook. They had no kids. Trying, Jake said with a shrug. Or not, depends who you ask. I didn't know what to say, so I took a too big sip of beer and nearly coughed it into the coleslaw. Lauren filled the silence smoothly. She's always been better at small talk. Teaching, Love it. Classroom? Exhausting but worth it. The kids? Hilarious. Yes, we moved for the schools even though we don't have kids yet, because that's what you're supposed to say in neighborhoods where people look long-term and talk about property values like fantasy football. The afternoon slid into evening. At some point, I ended up helping Jake move a patio heater that worked exactly as well as your memory says it will in May, which is to say, not at all. He talked to me like we were already friends. He asked about my job, nodded in all the right places, told a story about his boss that was clearly workshopped to be funny, but landed anyway. He made you feel like you were the most interesting person he'd talked to all day. A party trick that's either the mark of a great host or a great politician. Sometimes those are the same thing. Every few minutes, I'd glance across the yard and see him laughing with Lauren. Nothing inappropriate, nothing concrete. Just that easy back and forth you have with someone who thinks they've met a kindred spirit. They compared playlists. He told her to text him for his smoker, pork shoulder recipe. She said she'd never used a smoker, but was open to being taught. Everyone laughed. Someone cracked a joke about smoking being a gateway drug to Thanksgiving turkeys. And we all pretended that was comedy. The speaker shuffled from Tom Petty to a 2000s throwback, and the kids screamed something about tag that had rules so complicated it looked like an IRS form. On our walk home, 2 doors down and across a shared strip of lawn that would later become a diplomatic border, Lauren said, "They seem nice." I said, "Yeah." Then because it sat weird in my chest, I added, "He's a lot." She laughed. "He's just friendly." "Friendly," I repeated, letting the words sit on my tongue. It tasted like the La Croix Jake gave me on move-in day. Light, fizzy, almost nothing, but just enough to remind you it's there. The summer found its rhythm. You could tell the time by our block's routine. Leaf blowers at 8 a.m. On Saturdays, which should be a crime, the Amazon van at noon, sprinkler systems hissing at 6 p.m., teenagers in hoodies at 10 p.m., pretending they're invisible. Lauren would come home from school with chalk dust on her fingers and collapse on the couch, and I'd make something resembling dinner, or we'd both give up and order pho from the place that writes your name in Sharpie on the lid like a love letter. We weren't perfect, but we were. Us. I knew the size she made when a headache was coming. She knew which cabinet I'd forget the peanut butter lips in. That kind of intimacy sounds small until you don't have it anymore. The first time anything pinged my radar in a way I couldn't immediately talk myself out of, it was a Tuesday. I remember because trash day was Wednesday, and I was wheeling our bin back from the curb when I heard laughing in our backyard. Not a problem. The neighbors' kids cut through sometimes, and Patricia's cat treats our deck like a vacation property. But when I rounded the corner, it wasn't kids. It was Lauren and Jake, standing a little closer than you do when you're just neighbors, looking at the lemon tree like it had told a joke. "Sir Citrus," Jake said, grinning. "You two are ridiculous." "Don't bully Sir Citrus," Lauren said, mock offended. "He tries his best." I felt that weird flick in my stomach. Not jealousy exactly, more like walking into a room and forgetting why you went there. A stutter in your brain. The sense that you've missed the setup to the joke everyone else is laughing at. "Hey," I said, and my voice cracked just enough to annoy me. "What's up?" Jake straightened like he'd been caught shoplifting. "Borrowing your ladder," he said, pointing to the side gate where our ladder leaned like a guilty witness. "Gotta clean out the gutters before it rains next week. You know how it is." "Yeah," I said, though I did not know how it is because gutters exist on a plane where water physics become witchcraft. "No problem." He thanked me like I'd handed him a kidney and promised to bring the ladder back better than he found it, which is not how ladders work, but I let it go. Lauren followed him through the side gate, kept talking, and then reappeared in our kitchen like nothing had happened. Maybe nothing had. That's the thing about the early signs. They are always deniable. If you bring them up, you sound petty. If you don't, you collect them like pennies in a jar, and one day the jar is heavy enough to knock you out. I tried to be the guy who lets it go. I don't like that guy now, the version of me who mistakes silence for strength. But at the time, it felt like maturity. Don't be weird. Don't be suspicious. Don't be the insecure husband who can't handle his wife having friends. And honestly, Lauren's not sneaky. She's not a cliche. She pays Venmo requests late and leaves drawers half open and can't lie about having eaten the last brownie without laughing. If something was there, surely I'd see it, right? That's what I told myself, like a bedtime story. We settled in. We bought a secondhand fire pit from a guy on Facebook Marketplace who called me boss 4 times in one sentence. We hosted a small group for s'mores, and Patricia told a story about a patient who woke up from anesthesia speaking fluent Spanish. Unverifiable, but she's 74 and can tell any story she wants. Jake and Marissa came over with a bottle of wine that probably cost more than our first month's rent at the old apartment. Marissa smiled the whole time, lukewarm and polite, like someone attending a wedding where she's not sure how she knows the couple. When the night was over and we were cleaning up sticky plates, I said, She doesn't talk much, huh? Lauren shrugged. I think she likes to watch him talk. It was a nothing line, a filler. It stuck in my brain like a seed between teeth. The next time I saw Jake, it was morning. I was backing out for work. He was jogging by with wireless earbuds and a face that said, I once thought about training for a marathon and never quite let the identity go. He slowed and gave me the half-wave joggers give each other. That little salute that means, we're both doing something healthy and we'd like credit. Big weekend plans? He puffed, because joggers also love small talk while their lungs are on fire. Mulch, I said, because that's what my weekend had become. Buying bags of smelly dirt and dumping them in tidy circles like a raccoon, trying to summon a demon. Hell yeah, he said, like I just told him I closed on a second home. If you need the wheelbarrow, it's behind our shed. Open season, neighbor tax. Thanks, I said, and he pointed finger guns, illegal in some states, and kept running. It felt fine. It all felt fine. For a while, the cul-de-sac gear shifted to routine, and routine is the great anesthetic. You stop noticing, that's its job. Then summer tilted into late summer, and the days got a little shorter, and the shadows got a little longer. And one Friday evening, I texted Lauren to see if she needed anything from the store. No answer. Not weird. She often stayed late grading or talking to a parent who discovered homework exists. I grabbed a rotisserie chicken like a suburban cliche, plus a bag of salad that promised it would transform into a healthy meal if I believed hard enough. I pulled into the driveway, checked my phone, still nothing, and carried the groceries inside to the soundtrack of our aging HVAC unit, reminding me I should get it serviced. As I was unpacking, I heard voices through the open kitchen window. Our backyard and Jake's share a fence line that is technically tall enough to be private and practically low enough to be communal. The voices were low and easy. I recognized hers. His, too. I told myself not to be dramatic. I carried the chicken to the counter and stuck my head out the sliding door like a curious neighbor in a sitcom. Lauren and Jake were sitting on our deck steps, close but not touching, looking at the sky like there was something written in it. They didn't jump when they saw me. They didn't look guilty. If anything, they looked like I'd interrupted a thought. There you are, Lauren said, easy as water. Jake was telling me about his smoker setup. Always, he grinned. I'm like a Spotify algorithm, but for wood chips. I laughed. Because what else do you do? I offered him a beer. He said no. Rest day. He stood, wiped his hands on his shorts like he'd been working even though he hadn't, and said, all right, man, have a good one. He touched the corner of our deck light as he passed it. A small, familiar gesture I only noticed later, and disappeared through the side gate like good neighbors do when they finish being good for the day. That night, Lauren ate chicken and made jokes about how the French eat salad after the meal, not before, as if that absolved us of the bag Caesar. I laughed where I was supposed to. After she went to bed, I stood in the dark kitchen and stared at the glow of the stove clock like it might blink a warning. Sir Citrus rustled on the deck in the breeze. The house sighed in the way houses do when they are settling, or when they are keeping secrets. Here's the part I wish I could rewrite. I didn't ask her. Not then, not honestly. I asked the kind of question that doesn't want an answer. So you and Jake are getting along? I said, as if I hadn't watched an entire conversation from 20 feet away. She said, he's easy to talk to, in the tone you use for waiters and hairdressers. I said, cool, in the tone you use for a weather report. We both pretended that was sufficient. If you're looking for the exact moment a story like mine goes from maybe to uh-oh, I think it's there. Not when something happens, but when something isn't asked. When you choose the polite version of yourself over the honest one because the honest one might break the evening, and the polite one can get you through dessert. A week later, Cora added us to the neighborhood text chain, which is how I learned that Maple Ridge can mobilize more efficiently than FEMA if someone posts, "Coyotes out tonight FYI," or "Who left a Razor scooter in front of 18?" It's also how I learned that Lauren's name and Jake's name started appearing next to each other in ways that were easy to explain and hard to ignore. Can someone help Jake move a sofa Saturday? Lauren, do you still have Patricia's pie dish? Jake's doing brisket on Sunday if anyone wants a slice. I told myself this is what communities look like. I told myself this is why we moved. Then on a warm Thursday evening that felt like a late postcard from July, Lauren put on lipstick to go drop off a book at Jake and Marissa's. Which book? I said, like a detective who has not done the reading. The pastry one, she said, grabbing a tote bag. Marissa wanted to try the galette. She kissed me on the cheek, light and quick, the kind of kiss used by couples who have company in the next room. Back in a sec, she said, which is a unit of time that can be 5 minutes or forever. I watched her walk down the sidewalk. She didn't knock when she got there. She just opened the gate and went around back like she lived there. It was a tiny thing. It rattled my bones. She was gone 40 minutes. When she came back, her hair smelled like someone else's fabric softener. She said, "They said hi." I said, "Cool," and we both allowed the word to sit between us like a neutral witness, who would later be called by the prosecution. I fell asleep that night to the sound of our neighbor's wind chimes and Lauren's soft, even breathing. I dreamed about being at the bottom of a swimming pool, looking up at faces distorted by water, their voices coming through as muffled rumors. I woke up with a taste of chlorine in my mouth and the kind of headache you get from clenching your jaw. On the way to work, I waved at Jake as he jogged past. He gave me the two-finger salute again, familiar and friendly. His smile reached his eyes. I didn't know yet that some men can smile while their house is on fire. If this were a movie, this is where ominous music would start. A low, almost imperceptible hum under scenes of perfect lawns and neighborly waves. On the surface, nothing had happened. Underneath, something had already broken. I just couldn't hear it over the sound of sprinklers and small talk. And if you're reading this, thinking, man, why didn't you just ask her, or knock on his door, or say something? I want to agree with you. I want to go back and shake the version of me who let politeness outvote his instincts. But real life is sticky. People are messy. Good neighbors become good friends, become something else when you're not looking. And by the time you notice, it's already started raining and you never learned how to clean your gutters. I didn't know it yet, but Maple Ridge had a way of turning friendliness into access and access into opportunity. You don't cheat with a stranger 2 towns over when you can do it with someone who knows your garbage day and your Wi-Fi name. It's logistics. And if Jake worked in ops, then I guess I was just a missed delivery. The day the first real crack split open, it was a Tuesday again. Trash night. There's a poetry to that I'd appreciate more if it hadn't been my life. I rolled the bin to the curb and saw Lauren standing in our driveway talking to Jake. They didn't look guilty. That came later. They looked like people who'd realized they'd found a shortcut on a map. He said something that made her tilt her head and smile in a way I used to think belonged to me. She touched her hair. It was a 2-second gesture, a reflex, a nothing, and my stomach dropped like I'd missed a step in the dark. Hey, I said too loud, like the word could herd them back into their proper places. They both turned and waved, neighborly to a fault. Was just asking if you guys needed help with the gutters before the storm, he said. Seriously, take the wheelbarrow anytime. Thanks, I said, and I meant it in the way you thank someone who is also stealing your wallet. Lauren looped her arm through mine like a stage direction. We're good, she said lightly. We've got it. We did not have it. We did not have anything at all. And yet, if you'd driven past right then, you'd have seen 3 friendly neighbors smiling in a driveway on a quiet street. Trash bins lined up like soldiers, hydrangeas nodding in the late sun, a lemon tree trying its best on a deck that held more secrets than it should. You would have thought, nice place to live. You wouldn't have heard the hum, not yet, but I did, finally, a little. And once you hear it, you can't pretend it's just the wind. If you've never lived in a neighborhood like Maple Ridge, here's the thing. Everything looks visible, but nothing really is. The lawns, the cookouts, the friendly waves, it's a curtain. Behind it, people live entire lives you only catch glimpses of through windows or overheard conversations at the mailbox. And once you start doubting, every curtain looks like it's hiding something. That summer, my doubts started multiplying like weeds in the cracks of a driveway. At first it was small. Lauren would say she was just dropping something at Jake and Marissa's, a pie plate, a book, a package that got delivered to us by mistake. But she'd be gone for 30 minutes, sometimes an hour. I'd ask what took so long, and she'd laugh it off. You know how it is, neighbor chat. Marissa loves to talk. But here's the thing, Marissa never loved to talk. If anything, she barely said more than polite phrases at the cookouts. Watching her try to hold a conversation was like watching someone try to start a car with no gas in the tank. So who was Lauren really talking to for an hour? One night she came back flushed, hair tucked behind her ears in that way she does when she's been playing with it nervously. She smelled faintly of beer. Oh, Jake offered me one while I was over there, she said breezy. He was in the garage. We got to chatting about teaching, believe it or not. I nodded, but something inside me twisted. Jake never once asked me anything about teaching. In fact, the guy never asked me anything about my life unless it was an opening to talk about his smoker or his latest workout routine. So why was he suddenly a scholar of education theory with Lauren? Then there were the clothes. Lauren was casual by nature. T-shirts, jeans, messy bun. But suddenly, she was putting on lipstick and perfume to take Sir Citrus More Sun or water the hydrangeas. She'd linger by the mirror before stepping outside. Once I teased her, "You're getting fancy for the lemon tree?" She rolled her eyes, but there was a flicker of something, irritation maybe, in her face. Don't be weird, I just like feeling put together. I wanted to believe her, but I kept noticing. The lipstick didn't stay on long enough for anyone but a very nearby audience to notice. It came to a head one Thursday night. She said she was going to return a dish to Marissa. I muttered something like, "Sure, say hi to Jake for me." She froze, turned back, narrowed her eyes. What's that supposed to mean? My stomach dropped. I hadn't meant it as sharp as it came out. But once the words were out, I couldn't take them back. Nothing, I said quickly. Just, you're over there a lot. Her face hardened. He's our neighbor. You said yourself they're nice. Do you want me to be rude? That's not what I said. Then what are you saying? We went in circles, her accusing me of paranoia, me fumbling to explain the knot in my gut. Finally, she snapped, if you don't trust me, then maybe this whole move was a mistake. That line burned. A mistake. Our house, our marriage, all of it reduced to one word in a fit of anger. She stormed out anyway, came back an hour later, muttered, good night, and climbed into bed without another word. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering when exactly friendly neighbors had become a landmine. It wasn't just me. The neighborhood has eyes and mouths. One evening, Patricia, the retired nurse who knows everything about everyone, stopped me while I was taking out the trash. Lauren's making fast friends with Jake, she said casually, like commenting on the weather. I forced a laugh. Yeah, I guess. She tilted her head, her eyes sharp behind her glasses. Just be careful. He's charming. Too charming, if you ask me. Marissa doesn't say much, but she sees everything. She shuffled away before I could answer, leaving me standing there with the trash bin and a heart pounding in my ears. From then on, I started noticing side glances at block gatherings, the way conversation stopped when I walked up, the whispers, the sympathy in people's smiles. I wasn't crazy. People knew, or at least suspected, and that humiliation burned worse than any private doubt. By September, I had memorized the glow of Lauren's phone, the way she'd angle it away when a notification buzzed, the way her face would light up, then dim when she saw me watching. One night, curiosity got the better of me. I waited until she was in the shower, then picked up her phone. Locked. Passcode changed. When she came out, towel around her, she saw me holding it. Her eyes went wide, defensive. Don't, she snapped. That's my privacy. Your privacy, I shot back. From your husband? Her face flushed red. I can't believe you don't trust me. And just like that, I was the bad guy. Again. The final straw that month came during a Saturday cookout. Jake was at the grill, flipping burgers like he was auditioning for a Food Network show. Lauren stood beside him, laughing at something he said. Not unusual, on the surface. But then I caught it. The way he looked at her. Not a neighborly glance, not even a flirty one. It was longer, heavier, filled with something I didn't want to name, and she didn't look away. For the first time, I realized, if they weren't already crossing the line, they were standing right on it, toes hanging over the edge. And everyone could see it but me. That night, lying in bed beside her, I stared into the dark and felt it hit me full force. The marriage I thought was rock solid was already cracking, and the worst part was, it wasn't some stranger. It wasn't some coworker in another city. It was the guy 2 doors down, the guy who waved at me every morning, the guy who borrowed my ladder, the guy who smiled while slowly dismantling my life. This section will dig into Lauren volunteering to help Jake with projects, OP being left alone, more neighborhood gossip, OP checking her phone computer for proof, fights turning uglier, and that creeping certainty that it's no longer just suspicion, but reality. If suspicion was a weed in my stomach, escalation was the full overgrowth. You start telling yourself it's just in your head, and then suddenly you realize the vines are crawling up the walls, cracking the plaster, pushing into the beams. The house still stands, but only because you're pretending not to hear it creak. Jake had a knack for projects. He was always tinkering, fixing the fence, staining his deck, building something in his garage. At first, I thought it was normal suburban dad stuff, but then Lauren started volunteering herself for them. Oh, Jake needs help holding the ladder while he replaces a light fixture. Marissa wanted me to help paint their spare room. He's smoking ribs and asked if I'd taste test the rub. Always something, always a reason to be over there. I'd sit in our living room, scrolling aimlessly on my phone, while my wife spent hours 2 doors down. Sometimes I'd step onto the deck just to listen. If the wind was right, I could catch their voices, faint laughter, her laugh, sharp and bright, floating back across the fence line. The laugh that used to be mine. It wasn't just the time she spent there. It was how she came back, flushed, animated, like she'd just had the best conversation of her life. She'd tell me about Jake's projects with more excitement than she told me about her own work. She'd reenact his jokes. I'd nod along, biting my tongue, dying inside. One night she came back from helping with the garage, hair a little messy, eyes bright. She flopped on the couch beside me and said, "He's just so easy to talk to." That line hit me like a hammer, because that's what she used to say about me. The whispers in the neighborhood grew louder. At another block gathering, I caught Patricia's sharp eyes on Lauren and Jake as they stood close, talking in hushed tones. Later, she leaned over to me and murmured, "Be careful, dear." It wasn't even subtle anymore. The looks, the pauses in conversation when I walked up. It was like being the last person to get the joke. Everyone else knew. Everyone else saw. One neighbor even joked, "Lauren's practically an honorary Johnson by now," Jake's last name. Everyone laughed, but the sound was hollow. I forced a chuckle while bile rose in my throat. I told myself I wasn't going to snoop again, but paranoia is a disease, and eventually you relapse. One evening, she left her laptop open on the counter while she ran upstairs. I glanced at the screen. A Facebook tab was open. There it was, Jake's name, highlighted in her Messenger sidebar. Dozens of messages. My heart raced as I scrolled. Nothing explicitly damning, no "I love yous" or "let's run away," but the intimacy was unmistakable. Inside jokes, late-night timestamps, her telling him about frustrations with me, him replying with sympathy. The kind of conversation you only have when you've decided someone else is your person. When she came back downstairs, I closed the laptop and plastered a smile on my face. But inside, something curdled. From there, the fights got worse. I'd make a small comment, "You've been over there a lot lately," and she'd explode. Accuse me of being controlling, paranoid, insecure. She'd spin it around so fast I'd end up apologizing for even asking. Once I said, "Do you realize how this looks?" She shot back, "Maybe if you trusted me, it wouldn't look like anything." Another time I asked why she couldn't just text Marissa instead of hanging out with Jake so much. She sneered, "Because Marissa's boring. He actually listens." That cut deep. Deeper than she realized, maybe. Or maybe she knew exactly how deep it would cut. The worst humiliation came at a neighborhood barbecue. Jake was holding court at the grill as usual, Lauren right beside him. They laughed, whispered, shared little smiles that made my blood boil. I was across the yard, beer in hand, watching. And I realized other people were watching too, whispering, glancing at me with pity. At one point, Jake put his hand lightly on her back as he leaned over to show her something on his phone. It was nothing. A casual touch. The kind of thing you could brush off. But the way her shoulders relaxed, the way she leaned in, it was everything. I locked eyes with Patricia across the yard. She gave me a look, sad, knowing. That's when I knew for sure. This wasn't just in my head. That night, I confronted her. "Everyone sees it," I said flatly. "The way you are with him." She rolled her eyes. "Oh my God, you're embarrassing yourself. He's just a friend, our neighbor. You sound insane." "Insane?" I snapped. "For noticing my wife spends more time with the guy 2 doors down than with me? For noticing the way you light up when you talk about him? For seeing the messages?" That froze her. Her eyes narrowed. "You went through my laptop?" "Don't flip this on me," I shot back. "You're basically having an emotional affair right in front of everyone." Her face twisted with anger. "Emotional affair? Seriously? You need help." I almost lost it then. Almost screamed, but instead I just stared at her, chest heaving, and said, "If it's not an affair yet, it's only because you haven't let it go that far. But you want to, don't you?" She didn't answer, just stormed off to bed, slamming the door behind her. And that silence said more than any denial ever could. I sat on the couch until 3 a.m., the hum of the fridge filling the silence. My phone buzzed a few times with work emails. I ignored them. Through the window, I could see Jake's house. Dark, quiet, ordinary. But I knew. I wasn't fighting shadows anymore. I wasn't inventing monsters. The monster was 2 doors down, and he waved at me every morning. Paranoia is exhausting. Living in suspicion is like carrying a backpack full of bricks everywhere you go. Eventually, your spine caves. I told myself I couldn't live like this forever. Either I was wrong, and I'd make a fool of myself for doubting, or I was right, and my life was already over. So I decided to find out. I bought a cheap outdoor camera on Amazon, the kind marketed as a Ring alternative. Set it up by the side gate, angled just right to catch the back deck. I told Lauren it was for security. She nodded distractedly, not even questioning it. The first few days, nothing. Just packages being dropped off, squirrels investigating Sir Citrus, the occasional neighborhood kid cutting through. Then one Tuesday night when I was working late, my phone buzzed with a motion alert. I opened the feed. There she was, Lauren slipping out the back door. No bag, no book, no pie plate excuse. Just her walking across the yard. She opened the side gate and walked straight to Jake's back door. He was waiting. She disappeared inside. My chest tightened. My vision blurred. I watched the timestamp roll on. 8:47 p.m., 9:22 p.m., 10:05 p.m. Finally, at 11:16, the feed showed her slipping back home, hair messy, adjusting her shirt. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was fact. I didn't confront her right away. I needed more. Because if there's one thing about betrayal, it's that the betrayer will always say, "You misunderstood. You're overreacting." I wanted evidence so solid she couldn't wriggle out. Over the next 2 weeks, I collected it. More late-night trips caught on camera. More motion alerts. Each time she walked the same path. Out our door, through the gate, into his. I screenshotted every clip, saved every timestamp. My phone became a graveyard of proof. The final nail came on a Saturday. She told me she was running to Target. Said she'd be back in an hour. I waited. 10 minutes later, I checked the feed. There she was again, slipping into Jake's house. I didn't think. I just drove home. Pulled into the driveway so fast I nearly clipped the mailbox. My hands were shaking as I stormed across the lawn. I didn't even knock. Just yanked open his side gate and marched to the back. Through the sliding door, I saw them. On his couch. Too close. His hand on her thigh. Her laughing, leaning into him. When they saw me, their faces drained of color. Lauren shot up, stammering, "It's not what it looks like." I laughed. A broken, bitter laugh. "It's exactly what it looks like." Jake tried to stand, hands up like he was innocent. "Man, let's talk," I cut him off. "Talk? You've been talking to my wife enough, don't you think?" Neighbors heard the shouting. Doors opened, curtains twitched. Within minutes, half the block was watching from their lawns as I dragged the truth into the open. "She's been sneaking over here every night," I shouted, waving my phone with the camera clips. "You all see it, right? You've all whispered about it. Well, here it is. Proof." Lauren was crying. Jake looked furious, but not at himself. At me for blowing it up. Patricia, bless her, shook her head and muttered, "Knew it." The humiliation was nuclear. My private nightmare was now the block's evening entertainment. Lauren tried to follow me home, sobbing, begging me to talk about it inside. I slammed the door in her face. That night I packed a bag and went to my sister's, told her everything. Showed her the videos. She didn't even look surprised, just hugged me and said, "I'm so sorry." The next day I told Lauren it was over. Divorce, no discussion. She begged, pleaded, promised it was just emotional, or just confusion, or a mistake. I didn't care. The camera didn't lie. My eyes didn't lie. The whole damn neighborhood didn't lie. Within a week, she moved out, back to her parents while things got sorted. Jake's wife, Marissa, filed for divorce too. Word spread like wildfire. Maple Ridge went from cheerful suburbia to scandal central. The whispers turned to open gossip. Did you hear about Jake and Lauren? Can you believe they did that to their spouses right here? Every time I stepped outside, I felt the eyes. Pity, sympathy, judgment. The block cookout stopped. The text chain went quiet. The veneer of perfect suburbia shattered. It's been months now. The divorce is in motion. The house feels empty without her, but in a strange way, it also feels lighter. No more waiting for motion alerts. No more pretending not to see. Sometimes I still catch myself staring at Jake's house, wondering if he feels like he won, if he thinks it was worth it. But here's what I've realized. The worst part isn't even losing her. It's losing the illusion. The idea that you can trust the smile across the fence, the wave in the driveway, the borrowed ladder. Because in the end, it wasn't just my wife who betrayed me. It was the whole idea of safety in that neighborhood, the whole dream of Maple Ridge. And now, every time a neighbor waves at me, I wave back. But I don't believe it anymore. Not one bit. If the discovery was the explosion, the weeks that followed were the fallout cloud, settling over everything in Maple Ridge. Nothing looked different on the surface. Lawns still trimmed, sprinklers still timed, kids still raced scooters down the block. But beneath, the neighborhood felt radioactive. I filed within a week. It felt brutal, fast. But what was there to salvage? The lawyer didn't even blink when I explained why. He'd seen it before. Probably too many times. Lauren texted me paragraphs, begged for a chance to talk it out, to work through it in therapy. I ignored most of them. When I finally answered, all I said was, "You didn't just betray me. You betrayed our home, our street, our life. There's nothing left to fix." She sent back, "I made a mistake." No, I thought. Mistakes are forgetting the laundry in the washer. This was a choice, repeated. The gossip was relentless. Patricia didn't bother whispering anymore. I overheard her telling another neighbor, "I warned him. I told him Jake was too charming." Some people looked at me with pity, some with judgment. Some avoided me altogether, like betrayal was contagious. The worst part? Jake acted like nothing happened. He still jogged in the mornings, waved at people, made small talk about mulch. The audacity was staggering. Marissa moved out quietly. One day her car was gone. The next, a for sale sign popped up. Word was she'd filed too. No one blamed her. A month in, Lauren showed up at the house. I didn't let her in. We stood on the porch, her eyes swollen, voice breaking. "I never wanted to hurt you," she whispered. "You just wanted him more," I said flatly. She winced, tears spilling. "It wasn't like that. It just happened." "No," I said. "You let it happen, over and over. That's the difference." She sobbed. I closed the door. Nights were the worst. The silence of the house pressed in on me. I'd walk through the rooms, seeing ghosts of what we'd planned, a nursery that would never exist, a guest room that was supposed to hold family visits, a backyard where laughter had turned sour. I drank too much for a while, spent too long staring at the lemon tree, wondering why Sir Citrus survived when my marriage didn't. But slowly, the silence became bearable. I started to realize it was better to be alone than to be lied to in my own bed. Maple Ridge took sides. Some neighbors nodded to me, offered support. Others, unbelievably, seemed to rally around Jake. "He's a good guy," I overheard one man say. Things just got complicated. Complicated, as if sneaking into another man's marriage bed was a scheduling conflict. I stopped going to the block gatherings, stopped answering the group text, stopped waving back. The dream of Maple Ridge was gone. Now it was just a row of houses I couldn't wait to leave. Looking back, I think the hardest part wasn't the cheating itself. It was the closeness of it. If she'd cheated with some stranger across town, I could have detached. But she chose the man who smiled at me every morning, the man who borrowed my ladder, the man who stood in my driveway like a friend. It made my whole world feel unsafe. But here's the thing, I survived. The house is still mine for now. The papers are moving. Lauren is out of my life. Jake is a ghost I don't acknowledge, even when he jogs past. And me, I'm learning. That trust is fragile, that neighbors aren't always friends, that sometimes the American dream has termites, but also that healing is possible, even after the worst betrayal. Because at least now when I sit on my deck and stare at Sir Citrus, the only sound is the wind through the leaves, not my wife's laughter floating back from 2 doors down.